Hi, I'm Casey Lueders, and this is Could Be Pretty Cool. My guest today is Annick Odom, a Belgian-American folk singer, bassist, and clarinetist from Morgantown, West Virginia. She's an apprentice to some of Appalachia's master traditional artists, an organizer in her local old-time music scene, and the artist behind the album Linen of Words. But Annick didn't always see Morgantown as the place to build a creative life. Her path home took her a lot further away than most, and what she found when she got back shapes a lot of what she's doing now. In this conversation, we get into the old-time scene in West Virginia, an art form called a cranky that you may or may not have heard of, and how Annick has pieced together a creative career that mixes community projects, grants, orchestra gigs, and the experimental music she makes purely for the love of it. So I'm very excited to have today's guest on. This is someone who I have worked with, not necessarily, I would say, in an artistic or creative capacity, but I guess research and data for the arts is also creative. But this is someone who I've had the pleasure of working with, but I actually don't know much about their creative life outside of the office. So this is going to be a treat for me. Annick, thank you so much for being on Could Be Pretty Cool.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Casey.
Of course. So could you tell the folks a little bit more about you and what it is that you do, all the things that you do?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Annick Odom, and I am a Belgian-American folk singer, a bassist, clarinetist by training. I was born and raised in Morgantown, West Virginia, and initially a lot of folks from Appalachia, and I think even from the South or from rural areas, like bought into this idea that in order to succeed, I needed to leave and go to a bigger city. And so for a long time, my eyes were set on Pittsburgh. Then when auditions and stuff came around as a teenager, I ended up in Michigan, lived in Michigan for a while, then moved to the Netherlands because they speak Dutch, and I didn't realize how different the Netherlands was to Belgium. But I lived in the Netherlands for a while, and then maybe, as some folks might also empathize with, I started to feel homesick and started to also recognize all the wonderful things that I had not really valued growing up in a smaller, more rural place with a lot more nature. And one of the big things I realized that I had not valued was the folk music there. In West Virginia in particular, I think there's a really thriving old-time scene, old-time being kind of the older style of fiddle tune that still exists and that were really paired with square dancing, but not the kind of Western square dancing that's really organized, but just silly, fun, country, backwoods community dancing that is for someone from 2 years old to 90 years old. And so I started calling square dances in the Netherlands, started playing old-time fiddle, American fiddle in the Netherlands, actually found a small community there. And then from that, kind of realized, wait, why am I in the Netherlands? I should just move back to the US. And so I did a little bit of a boomerang, moved from the Netherlands to Detroit, remembered that even though I love a lot of things about Southeast Michigan, it wasn't the right place for me, and then went back home to Morgantown, West Virginia. And while I have been there, I've been apprenticing with two lovely traditional folk artists. One is a fiddler and folklorist, and I don't know, he does everything down to making chairs and baskets. But Jerry Milnes, who just won the National Endowment for the Arts Heritage Fellowship, which is really cool. I'm excited to see him getting the recognition that he deserves. And then also with Taylor Runner, who's a square dance caller. So I have a lot of hats, like a lot of musicians and creative folks. Some things make money, some things don't. Some things I do for the money. Some things I enjoy that I don't make money on. And I do it because I love it. And I think a lot of the folk music stuff is related to that love and the love of community. And so since being back in the US, I also put out an album called Linen of Words, which actually, funnily enough, I think has a lot of experimental elements that I got from the Netherlands, but is with a lot of musicians from Michigan, because that's where all my friends are from my undergrad at University of Michigan, and then is inspired and takes a lot of materials from West Virginia. But so, yeah, I think I have really a lot of different hats, some more in a performance space, but more and more so, I think also a lot that are in more of a community organizing space.
So that's really fascinating. I consider myself to be well versed in a lot of art scenes, creative scenes. I know nothing about what is popping in Morgantown, West Virginia. You mentioned that at the time when you were like coming up, hungry, I got to make my career, like you decided to leave. But can you paint the picture for those of us who are like, what is the creative scene like in Morgantown, West Virginia?
Yeah, it's funny. It's a small-ish place, but there's a university. It's a university town. West Virginia University is there. So there's a really international scene, actually, compared to a lot of West Virginia. That's how my parents got to be there. My mom is from Belgium. My dad's from the southern United States. And I would say I've even only dipped my toes into all of the wonderful kinds of art and music that exist in Morgantown. And I think I'm realizing, too, as I get older, that you can live in the smallest of places and spend your whole life getting to know every little area. So I think for me, the things that I notice about Morgantown and that have really drawn me back are, the old time scene, the traditional folk music scene. So there's 3 jams that happen every week with slightly different members of the community. One is kind of the older folks jam or the beginners jam. I think older folks tend to be, in this community at least, tend to be really excited about bringing younger people in. So it's a fun mix of people who've just started playing the instrument and folks who've been playing for a really long time. And that's my favorite jam to go to. It's on Tuesdays at the university in Percival Hall, which is it's where all the stuffed dead animals are. They were donated at some point. So there's like a lion and a bear and a tiger. Like, it's a very weird vibe. But that's on Tuesdays. Wednesdays, there's 2 jams that happen. One's at a brewery and has most of the younger kind of hot musicians. And another one is the more middle-aged folks. But it's fun that everyone has found their own place, but you can also go to all of the jams and they all have their own slightly different micro community going on. There's also a gospel sing that happens once a month at one of the arts centers. There's a lot of jamming that just happens at people's homes. There's square dances that happen about once a month in Morgantown, but there's also dances in other places. There's all kinds of things. This year, I've really been trying to bring one very niche art form called a cranky into Morgantown. And crankies I've been practicing how to explain them because it's kind of a weird word, but basically they're named for the crank mechanism that turns them. And it's a scroll that is a picture, a very long panoramic picture that is usually paired nowadays with a story or with a folk song. And as you turn the crank, you get to see more and more of the story. So it moves along with the song. I've heard them described as paper movies or, panoramic storytelling machines, all kinds of things. They used to be really popular before video and film and everything came about. And they were, I would say, the immersive experience of their time. It was something that you paid quite a lot to go see back in the day.
I have a faint memory of my childhood of seeing something like that, either at a puppet place or that's really interesting to me. Like, all the things you're saying, it sounds like this whimsical world from the past, but clearly this is still a very present scene. And like you said, folks are bringing younger folks in and you're apprenticing with some of the masters and learning. And so I'm very curious, in your opinion, like, where do you see the progression of the old style? Is that what you call it? The like
old time, yeah.
Old time, yeah. How, in the midst of all the technological this and that, and how is this community continuing to thrive now?
Yeah, so I'm not really a part of other kind of more community music forms, but for instance, I imagine it in a way it's like jazz or like some other kind of jam-based music, in that there are like different gradations of how community oriented that kind of art form can be. People perform it, and then obviously you can't just jump up on stage and join them. But also there are moments where it's really a jam. It's really open to anyone to join in. There are certain rules for each community. For instance, in old time, most folks would not be that excited to see a saxophone player walk in or someone with a specific, usually it's bass, banjo, guitar, fiddle, That's the main instrumentation. And the tunes usually, historically, they really went along with dance music. So they're quite repetitive. They're usually in keys that are really good for string instruments, like in D, G, A. And they are there's little subtleties and little differences between the tunes, but overall, they're quite homogeneous as far as a 1-4-5 chord. If you speak music theory vibes, it's really meant to be a rhythm. And almost, I've heard someone describe it as trance music, which I don't know if I go that far, but it's repetitive, meant to be danced to. And so I think one thing I really like about this kind of community music is also because it has some simpler aspect, like within the structure, I think you can dive really deep, get really good. And obviously there's all these subtleties you can get into, but at a really basic level, someone can join in knowing almost nothing, basically not knowing how to play the guitar, and can still come and hang out. And so I think there's some people who, for them, it's really just a way to hang out and be part of that community. Basically like having a game night or going to play, watching movies together. It's something that you can be into, and it happens to have music.
So I think that's nice. There is a community aspect where people are creating. There's very low stakes, low pressure. It sounds like people just want to come have a good time. But switching gears, one of the things that we love to talk about on this show are the different aspects of our guests' creative careers. And for a lot of people, they're doing a couple different things, or they have done a few different things as far as the aspects of their careers that they rely on for money and food and living indoors and such. So can you talk to us a little bit about like the mix that's cobbled together? You mentioned there's some stuff you do for pay, some stuff that you do for the love of it. But right now I want to talk about what is or what has been the sort of narrative arc of your creative career.
Yeah. So what I was talking about before, like the community aspect, I think actually in some ways has also been one of the ways in which I've created a career at times. When I moved back to the US, I took a full-time non-music job. But when I lived in the Netherlands, I worked full-time as a musician. And that means many different things. So it means teaching, it means playing in an orchestra, I started organizing square dances and playing in an American old-time band in the Netherlands. I started doing my solo stuff, started doing more experimental things. But anyway, a lot of the kind of community-focused things actually, I think, are really well suited, for instance, to receiving grant support. And so I've done a lot of community projects which have supported me in my administrative costs or in my teaching costs. The Crankies festival that I mentioned, I've been able to get some grants for to help support, which also has helped support the local community in paying some visual artists and musicians to perform and create. Also, there's a lot of creative aging grants that are available both in the Netherlands and in West Virginia even too. And so I think a lot of community projects are really well suited to fighting the ongoing loneliness epidemic and to encourage people to come together and be together. And so for me, actually, yeah, community art has been a really great way to support myself, but also to do things that I really find important and love. And I think the things that I make for myself, while I definitely have been paid to play performances, I'm really interested in experimental music, and those are not really popular to the larger community. And so for me, some of the more experimental aspects of my creative practice have purposely not been focused on trying to make money. If I get paid to play a gig, that's great, but it's been more about feeding my own interest in music and in sound. Whereas actually doing these creative projects that involve community building has actually, in a way, I think, helped me connect with community members who then end up being the audience who come to my own weird bass and voice performances, or who do things that maybe they wouldn't necessarily seek out, but because they know me and they trust me, they're down to come and support me, at least on a local and regional level. But yeah, so community-focused stuff, I definitely still play in some orchestras, hope to keep doing that. I really think I also, as I've gotten older and done more organizing on my own, I value, in some ways, the larger organizational structures that exist, which allow me to just show up as a musician and not to have to wear all those other hats. It's kind of cool to just get a part and you learn the part and you show up and you get paid because you played the thing. And that, I think sometimes, especially 5-10 years ago, I was like, I don't want to be told what to do. And then I realized after organizing a bunch of things, it's like, sometimes it's actually fine. As long as you're down with whatever that thing is, I'm okay to give up some of the leadership and just play some Brahms or some Beethoven and have a good time and get paid to play the bass. Is pretty cool.
It was very just old school, a modern version of what I would imagine a musician in America traveling to Europe, going on tour. It's very romantic in a way. And so I would love to know for you, you mentioned some of the mindset that you had 5-10 years ago. Looking 5-10 years into the future, we all know things with almost every aspect of the arts and creativity are being affected right now by AI, affected by the platforms where we're able to distribute our work. But you still have this very community-centered, hey, y'all have to be here in person to get this experience type of industry and art form. So yeah, 5 years from now, what is it that you truly hope to be doing in your creative practice?
Yeah, in a way, I hope I'll be doing somewhat of a similar thing, maybe with a slightly different mix of percentages of how much I'm doing what. One thing I really miss about the Netherlands compared to being in the United States is the financial support that existed for lower classes or lower income status folks, and the safety net that existed if something fell through, especially if you were a freelancer. I think that has made it really difficult. Moving back to the US, I decided, okay, I need to get a full-time job so that I can have healthcare and have a definite amount of money that I can pay my rent with every month. I think in the Netherlands, it was so common, even in research positions. I worked at a university and had briefly during COVID, had a 20-hour-a-week job. And the director of the center at the university was working 25 hours a week. I would love to find myself in that kind of community where you can have some sense of stability, like through some kind of salaried position or some kind of stable way of making money, and or a very stable government support system that would feel like it could pick you up if you fell down or if something happened. But I really love all the things I'm doing. Like I think I thrive on not only doing music, I'm really a perfectionist. And I think the times when I've only done music, it felt like there was so much pressure on me to do it really well. And in a way, having other forms of income has helped me mentally. I think, one, to not be like as stressed about taking every gig that I'm offered. I can really think about, do I want that gig? Is it serving the thing that I want? I've been trying to think about, is it a good amount of money? Is it good people? Is it a good time? And if it doesn't have two of those things, say no. And I think compared to 5 years ago, I'm definitely way better at being able to choose that because I have this other job. So I think in the future, I'd like to be able to do that as well, and maybe even more. I do hope I keep making weird art. And I think the more, we were discussing briefly AI and stuff like that, but I think the more that AI comes into our lives, the more that I just want to make art that AI would never. Like, why would it make a bunch of like sounds? No one wants that, but I do. I just want to find me in my little community of weird sounds. And I think I also want to be more and more local the older I get. I think the kind of idea of fame through social media or through Spotify listens or whatever feels not like the kind of life I want to live. I would much rather have 5 people who I know come to my show and really be touched, and me get to see them be touched and get to know them as people and see their art or their creativity. I would much rather like that than a million listens. And I think I've also been trying for myself to continue to divide this sense of being good at something with it being worthwhile to do. I think the striving of being good is really great. I love trying to be good and I love trying to improve, but I'm trying also to just make things. And I think, I can't remember now who it was. Of course, I've been doing this, but there's like I think it was maybe Stockhausen or a pretty famous composer who was asked about, do you ever feel embarrassed about things you made 10 years ago? And he was like, no, because it's a portfolio. It's like how I arrived to here. And so I think as I get older and have more and more that I've made, I would hope to keep that same kind of mentality of that was me 10 years ago. Wasn't that fun? And now I'm doing something really different, or maybe I'm doing the same thing. Yeah. The other thing I think is really interesting about community music is that you get to meet so many people who have put very differing amounts of energy into their musical ability, but they have so many other skills that they're bringing to the table. And you don't necessarily know that from the jam. In a moment, I try to not judge if someone can play a tune or not, because I think there's so many other things that they can do that weren't needed in that moment, but are really cool about them. And I think it's hard in music sometimes, or in any field. Yeah, if someone isn't good at that thing that is needed right then, to think of them as less than, or think of them as not being like worthwhile to be there. But actually, just like I have different reasons I'm involved in different music communities or different artistic practices, I think everyone does. And so it's fun for me compared to, for instance, my more classical music. I really enjoy in old time that there's just such a range of skills that you interact with at every jam. And I think if you're playing in an orchestra, because of the audition process and the professionalization that's happened in most classical communities, you don't see that wide range of ability in that specific field in the same space at the same time. And so I think for me, it's been really healthy to become more involved in traditional music. Also, because I think in traditional music, it's so much more common and so much more talked about that people have a day job, and that music is not the thing they're doing for money, or at least not the primary source, that it is not the primary source of their income. And I think in classical music, it's really toxic sometimes, like how a lot of the time people are making it because they're being bankrolled by their family, but they don't talk about it. They just never had to get a job and they make it big, and it seems like it's because of their talent, but really they never had to divide their time. So.
No, I think that's a gem that we've heard various interpretations of that particular type of creative professional on the show. And it's valid to look at your own quest for sustainability as an artist and to also see, okay, I probably shouldn't compare myself to this or this because everybody's journey is not the same. So no, there was a lot of great stuff in there. And finally, if people are listening and they're like, I enjoy weird bass vocal music, how could I get some more of that? How can people find out more about you, your work, your music, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so you can find me under Annick Odom, Annick Odom. And I'm still on streaming platforms. I'm not sure how long I'll want to stay on there for, but I am still there. I'm also on Bandcamp. And yeah, my newest album is Linen of Words, which comes from a poem by Mary Oliver. And I really enjoyed making that album. It has some bass and voice and weird stuff, but it also has about 20 other musicians who are mostly from Southeast Michigan playing a range of things. And there's electronics, there's banjo, there's bass, there's fiddle, there's clarinet, bass clarinet, field recordings, all kinds of little gems. Mostly songs that I learned from a woman named Phyllis Marks, who was in her 90s in Glenville, West Virginia when I met her. And she was a ballad singer who'd learned songs from her family for generations, but also some of my own songs. So it's been fun to put that out into the world. I feel like, yeah, I just wanted to put all the things that were in my imagination. And so it's not really a tourable album for sure, but it's, I guess, just a way for people to get a peek into what's going on in my head. Like the field recordings that drew me to old times. So the really old recordings of fiddlers who are playing, and there's like this like crackly sound and all this stuff, like, and that's what I think a lot of traditional musicians listen through. I was actually really drawn by all of the crackly sounds and like the weirdness around all these old materials and recordings. And I was really drawn to the stories that were happening right before or right after in a recording that was made in someone's living room while they're sipping on coffee or who knows what. And so I tried to make the album have some of those aspects as well that really drew me.
Oh yeah, it's a vibe.
Yeah.
It's an aesthetic. No, we love a nice little audio file here on the program. Annick, thank you so much. This has been so interesting. I hope that folks go and check out some old time and check out your work. And this is still very much a part of our culture. And it's great that folks like you are continuing to pass the torch. So thank you so much for coming to talk about it.
Thanks, Casey.
A few things stuck with me from that conversation. First, the way that Annick treats community work as the foundation of her career. The square dances, the Cranky Festival, the Creative Aging Project, those attract grant support. And they also build the trust that brings people out to her own shows. The audience for her experimental bass and voice music exists because she showed up for her community first. I also loved her filter for taking gigs. Good money, good people, good time. If an offer doesn't have at least 2 of those, she says no. And she was honest that having stable work outside of music is exactly what gives her the freedom to choose that way. And finally, Annick's point about separating being good at everything from it being worthwhile to do. At an old-time jam, you'll find every skill level in the same room. And the person struggling through a tune might be bringing something else entirely to the community. There's a lot of freedom in making things because that was you at that particular moment, not because you're trying to prove anything. There's a lot of freedom in making things that way. If you want deeper analysis and practical takeaways from this episode, head over to our Substack. And that brings us to the end of today's episode. Farewell, and may all of your creative endeavors flourish. Could Be Pretty Cool News is a Could Be Pretty Cool original production. Created, hosted, and executive produced by Casey Lueders. Senior producer is Liz Moore, and supervising sound editor is Trinity Jackson. Our original theme music was composed by Camille Stennis and cover art design by AJ Johnson. To learn more about Could Be Pretty Cool and discover whatever else we're up to, visit us at couldbeprettycool.substack.com. Thank you for listening.